From Adversity to Abundance, hosted by entrepreneur and seasoned real estate investor Jamie Bateman, is the ultimate guide for active and passive investors seeking clarity, mental fitness, and the confidence to make inspired decisions in the world of real estate. With a decade plus of investing experience across various niches and a background as a combat veteran, former Army officer, and multi-million-dollar mortgage note company owner, Jamie brings a wealth of knowledge and inspiring stories to each episode. Through weekly episodes featuring insightful interviews with industry leaders and solo explorations of mindset and strategy, listeners will uncover actionable advice and tips to overcome challenges and build lasting financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting, From Adversity to Abundance is your roadmap to turning obstacles into opportunities and achieving financial freedom.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by a special guest, Anna Kelley, the REI mom. Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so good to be here with you.
Thanks for joining us. I know you got a lot of things going on, and so I appreciate you taking the time, and I know our audience will appreciate you taking the time to share with us your story and drop some knowledge bombs for us. That would be fantastic. So for our audience, Anna, who is anyone not familiar with you, what are you up to today? And give us a little bit of context from the present day, if you would.
Sure. So I am primarily a multifamily syndicator, doing both value add deals and new development multifamily properties, primarily in Texas and in Pennsylvania and the Raleigh, North Carolina area. I've been investing in real estate since 1998. Got much more serious about it in 2009 after the great financial crisis, so the Great Recession. And I've done everything from fix and flips to small single houses to vacation rentals. I have 11 short-term rentals to small multifamilies. And that's really where I grew my wealth. I replaced my six-figure corporate career at AIG about 4 years ago, and then moved into much larger syndications from there.
Oh, that's great. And our audience is largely entrepreneurs within that entrepreneurial category. There's certainly a large subset of real estate investors like myself, and I was able to quit my W-2 last year. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot we can unpack there from a business, an entrepreneurial standpoint as well. So
yes.
And we'll certainly dive back into later in the show as to touch on kind of market conditions and what you have going on today. I look forward to that. So before we get there, though, we got to talk about some adversity, unfortunately. So, as you know, Anna, not everything is rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. And, I just quit my job and I just sip Mai Tais on the beach. So talk to us about some struggle that you've been through, pick it up where you'd like to start, but, let's dive into your backstory.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that this show focuses on adversity, because adversity is part of the human condition, and we all experience some type of diversity at different points of our lives. And ultimately, those that are successful often are not those that were handed an easy life on a silver platter or wealth to begin with. They're really people who have struggled and have made something of themselves despite adversity. So it's a really great topic, and something that I think is really important. One, to motivate people that regardless of what you're going through, better is possible, and you can control what that looks like into the future. And two, just to show that it's not all sunshine and roses. Even if we seem to have arrived, there's many things that can go wrong, health and relationships and, bad deals, etc. So a little bit about my backstory that I think is important when I think about how I've overcome diversity. I also did not grow up with wealth or any knowledge of money or how to become an entrepreneur, or even the thoughts of becoming an entrepreneur or real estate mogul, if you will. I grew up in Section 8 housing. So my parents divorced when I was very young, and my mom was a single mom, had a couple of very abusive husbands. And so I'm the oldest of 6 of us. And my mom worked really hard to get out of abusive situations, unfortunately got back in. And so she worked, 2 jobs to be able to survive. And that left me basically a turnkey child of a mother who loved me and who worked hard and supported me and encouraged me to be the best at whatever I could, to work on getting an education and getting out of the type environment that we were in. But there was a lot of sadness in my childhood and a lot of fear in my childhood. But those things are really what propelled me to become very, very driven and to realize that if I wanted a different life than what I had as a child, if I didn't want my children to be in an abusive situation or to spend evenings in a women's shelter like I had as a child, if I wanted better for myself and my family, I had to be willing to do whatever it took to succeed and to get myself out of that situation. So I'm thankful that I knew I had a choice and that there were things I could do, but I certainly did not have an easy childhood.
Yeah, and obviously we're not going to, pick that apart too far, but it's unfortunately it sounds like you've dealt with, we find on this show most of the types of adversity or most of the examples of adversity fall into primarily one or more of 3 categories: health, financial, or relationship. That's been one of my observations in having done this show for almost a year now. And we all deal with that on some level,
Yes.
challenges within those 3 categories on some level. Sounds like you've certainly dealt with at least 2 of those 3 categories, the relationship and financial. And
Yes.
talk to us a little bit more, just give us a little bit more context as to, how things were growing up for you, if you would.
Yeah, I will say this. My mother loved us and she was a very good mother. But she just wasn't home a lot because of what she was dealing with. And my parents were divorced. My father and stepmother married a few years after my parents divorced. And they, I thought, were very rich. In reality, my dad was a construction worker and my stepmother was a school teacher. And so they were an average, working class family. But I did see that, when there's not drugs and alcohol involved, when there's a cohesive family unit, going to church together, really focusing on the family, that it's like night and day what it's like to grow up in Section 8 housing, with a single parent that's struggling to survive. And so I really had a lens of, worldview that allowed me to see, if I want my life to look like this, there are steps I'm going to need to take to ensure that it looks like this, versus if I don't change, certain things, then this is what that would look like. And so, it's one of the things that kept me from ever doing drugs or drinking excessive alcohol, because I understood that that was very common. And some of that's because in poverty, there's not a lot of hope. Children and adults don't have a lot of hope that things will get better. And so, they're self-medicating in some ways emotionally. And that's another thing that I said, I can't give up. I remember sitting in this big tree, and it's interesting because I went back to this apartment complex that I grew up in for, I think, 12 years of my life. I used to sit in this tree and just cry and kind of dream. And I remember thinking there's no hope, and then battling with myself and saying, yes, there is. I see what it looks like for my friends whose parents went to school, who have degrees, who have a little bit more money. And I know that there's hope that I can have a life like that in the future. And so I think that's really important. And something innate in me, I think, even from a very young age, said, I can change what my future looks like. But that means I have to be very determined and very focused. And every decision I make can either lead to more abundance or more challenges in life. So I think
Sure.
that's kind of a theme of my life from the point of, middle school, trying to be the best, flute player that I could, or make straight A's, trying to get a scholarship. When I went to school, I graduated high school early, and I went to school year round while I worked full time year round, and graduated early from college. I was just very driven and determined that I'm going to work harder than my friends. I'm going to study harder than my friends. I'm going to, succeed and get this degree. And in my mind, once I graduated from college and had a really good job, all my problems would be over. It was naive of
Mhm.
me, but I'm glad that the
Sure.
mindset at least allowed me to get to that first level to say, I can be independent. I can have nice things. And I don't have to worry about a man taking care of me, quite honestly.
Sure. No, that's great. I mean, it's obviously unfortunate that you had to go through all the struggles with regard to poverty and being involved in at least seeing abuse and that kind of thing. But it
Yes.
sounds like on some level, what popped into my head was the Rich Dad Poor Dad. It sounds like you kind of had a little bit of a glimpse into both worlds, kind of the poor world and the quote unquote rich world. And what I'm also hearing is that you realized fairly early on that A, hope is critical, and
Yes.
B, that you do actually have a lot of control in your life, as to how your life ends up. And I think that's
Yes.
that's one thing that I made a mindset shift. I don't know, going 7-8 years ago, where instead of, and just speaking personally here, instead of watching the national news and being absorbed with international issues that I have zero control and influence over, how about I start looking at who's in my network, what strengths do I bring to the table, and what can I
Yes.
absolutely influence and control? Because we certainly can't, there are plenty of things we can't control, but I think we do have a lot more control over a lot of things in our life than we often give ourselves credit for. So I'll get off my
Absolutely.
I'll get off my soapbox. But now walk us through. You mentioned graduating from college early. Walk us through from that point, kind of up through today, if you would.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that happen, and again, I think, luck, people say, okay, you're lucky, right? They don't understand the backstory and all the adversity to get where you are. But I do believe that, when you're prepared and preparation meets opportunity,
Hmm.
that's what we call as luck. And so, I will say, I had a roommate who had gotten a job at Bank of America, and they were starting a private banking department back in, I think, 1997 or early 1998, and they were looking for masters, MBA people to come and join their private banking program to teach us to become financial advisors and go through our securities licenses and then work with the top most wealthy clients in the bank, the top 10% ultra high net worth. And my roommate said, hey, my roommate doesn't have an MBA, but she worked full time. She just graduated college. She's been an employee of the year at her company. You should really interview her. And so they asked me to come interview for this position. And I went in not with oh, I'm not qualified, but man, if I could get through what I did, I can do anything, and I'm going to go in and wow them. And I did. And I'm very, very thankful that they took a chance on me, but they gave me a position in private banking and taught me for the first time in my life about money and how wealthy people continue to preserve and grow their wealth as well as their income. And so that
Hmm.
was a huge turning point in my life where I understood discipline and determination, but you also have to understand money and how it works to know that you can create a better financial future than what the average American has, much less poverty, which is really hard to get out of. But even the
Sure.
average American, 70% live check to check to check, no matter how much money they make. And
Right.
so there's a struggle in chasing this American dream. So getting that job in private banking and working with very wealthy people opened my eyes to the kinds of choices that I could make once I had money. And I learned from them about what did you do to get to where you are today. And just to kind of piggyback to the next level, I remember talking to one of our clients. Back then, we offered a CD. It was in the 8% range in the late 90s. And I
Mhm.
remember this older gentleman laughing at me and saying, sweetheart, I make much more than that in my real estate investments. And I realized 2 years into private banking that I hadn't taken a single course on real estate and I knew nothing about it. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, wealthy people own real estate. and they make better returns than they do here. I need to at least start giving it some thought and start researching. And that led me to buy my first property, which was just a condo that I moved into instead of paying rent in an apartment building. And then I went to work for AIG. And working for AIG, it's one of the largest financial institutions in the world. I started working with products and product development, working with ultra high net worth individuals, banks, and institutions, and learning how do they invest their money? How do they grow wealth? And that really led me to starting to decide I'm going to keep my corporate job. I'm going to keep moving up the corporate ladder, keep making my income, but we're going to strive hard to pay off all the school loans, to pay off the cars, to get out of debt, and to start really investing. And real estate was one of the ways that I started investing from there.
Yeah, no, that's I can relate to a lot of that. And one thing I want to just emphasize is that you didn't have the whole path revealed to you beforehand, right? And none of us do, right? But it sounds like you were able to kind of focus on the task at hand and really step up with regard to schooling or your prior employment, and just doing the best job you could with what you were given at that time. And
Yes.
then opportunity presented itself, and then you made the most of that as well. So,
Right.
for the listener out there who they don't maybe see the opportunity right now, they haven't been presented that opportunity, I would just encourage people that just do the best you can right now with what you're working on. It's not to say you shouldn't analyze things or strategize or plan, but ultimately, we're given kind of smaller responsibilities initially to work through and work with and produce in that capacity, and then opportunity presents itself. And it sounds like you made the most of that, and then you were also able to learn from these high net worth individuals. Hey, what are they doing? And I'm sure you've reinvented the wheel on some level, but if this is working for this person, let me copy what they're doing and see kind of pull out lessons learned from them. And again, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I know for me, that's what I do. It's like, why this is working for someone else, I can follow what they're doing on some level and kind of make it fit my circumstances and go from there.
For sure. And I think, one of the things it's really important what you just said is doing the best you know how to do. You're not going to have it all figured out. And I'll say that because of my background, I'm very much a planner. Like, this is my next goal. This is how I'm going to achieve it. I'm going to drive to reach those goals. And so I do have that. But what I realize is you can make a lot of plans and you can get really good at something, but then there's other things in life that can completely derail that. And it doesn't mean that what you've done or what you've learned is for naught, but they become building blocks and lessons for you to say, okay, I've got this piece. Now this thing's going wrong. Now let me really focus on learning and growing in the next area and just keep doing the next right thing. And so, an example of that is after a few years of it was about 10 years in the financial world, working with the highest net worth individuals, banks, and their brokers and advisors, I thought I had gotten really smart about investments. Now, I wasn't wealthy yet, but I was starting to save. And most of it at that time was in my 401k. I had dabbled in real estate, but I didn't have big down payments to put on things. And so I just kept investing in my 401k. And I have to tell you, Jamie, in 2009, I was completely blindsided and devastated by the Great Recession. AIG being in the news that they were shutting their offices in New York, and these companies I had been invested in were failing. And I'll never forget, like, the most low day other than in my childhood was, in 2009, a day that we were on the news. I was told we're probably going to lose our jobs. And I looked at my 401k and it had lost about 3/4 of its value. And that was all that we owned. And the same week I found out I was pregnant with baby number 3. And we had just started a business in 2007. So we talk about these building blocks. I went from being an employee and having that mindset to, I want to be home with my kids and I want to grow wealth. So my husband needs to become an entrepreneur and he needs to start his own business and work for himself. So we moved my whole family across the country and started a job with a lot of debt in 2007. So we had paid off all this debt early, a personal debt, but I had been convinced that we're at the top, we're at a great economy. It's only going to get better. You got to go into business debt, and it's different than personal debt. And so we made that mistake. We learned from no personal debt, but we didn't learn about no business debt or
Mm,
starting a business when we understood nothing about economic cycles and the fact that we were heading in a downward recession. There were warning signs, but we didn't know anything about it. So for a while, I beat myself up, for a couple months in 2009, going, how did I miss this? How did we miss this? I tried to do all the right things, and yet here we are, wiped out, about $700,000 in business startup debt plus the building, no 401k, pregnant with a third baby, and AIG was our only income. And it was a
wow.
devastating few months that I had that decision again, like, am I going to learn from these things? Be thankful that I made the best decisions that I knew at the time, but say
Sure.
now that there's adversity, I'm either going to give up or I'm going to say I have hope. And once again, I'm going to figure out how to make the next best decision until I climb out of the debt
Mm.
and build up, the retirement again, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a lot to deal with for sure. I can't even imagine. I mean, and it's easy to say, but um, uh, no one saw it coming really on the level that it did happen.
Right.
So you weren't alone in that sense. I don't think anyone fully predicted the crash that occurred, but so what lessons did you learn? I mean, you referred to no business debt. Are you just completely anti-business debt, or how do you approach that?
I think a couple of really big lessons learned. One is that you can be really smart and really good and specialized in one area. For example, being an entrepreneur in a certain type of business.
Mhm.
So my husband was a chiropractor, right? He could be the
Okay.
best chiropractor that he could be. I could be the best real estate investor I could be. But if I didn't understand the economic factors that could impact me, even if I tried to make all the right decisions at the same time, then I may make poor decisions about the timing of when I start a business, when I take on that debt, what type of debt and how much I take on, for example. So if I had watched the economy, even though we were blindsided and major financial institutions were kind of blindsided, there
Sure.
were warning signs since
Mhm.
early 2006. And there were people writing articles saying,
Mm.
there's a housing crisis going to happen.
Mhm.
There's this crisis going to happen. There's too much derivatives and debt and risk and in these
Mhm.
financial institutions. But I wasn't reading any of that. I didn't think
Mhm.
economics really mattered. I thought I had more control than I really did. So I learned to
Gotcha.
become a student of the economy, understand real estate cycles because I'm now all in real estate, and understand economic cycles, at least to the point that I watch the warning signs to say, are we closer to the peak, or are there signs that we might be in a declining economy or hitting a recession? So that was the first thing. The
Mhm.
second thing was that debt. Generally speaking, I am opposed personally to any debt unless it's very, very, very stable, low leverage, and able to be covered by the income that comes in. So real
Mhm.
estate debt, I'm very comfortable with. I have tens
Mhm.
of millions of dollars in real estate
Mhm.
debt, literally.
Mm.
But it's debt that for the most part is fixed for a long period of time and
Sure.
is providing housing in areas that have significant housing demand, very low housing supply, really great jobs, great schools, and low crime. Those are kind of my check mark that if it doesn't have that quality of asset, I don't want to put a lot of debt on it. The quality of the asset and the location of the asset in very financially strong areas makes a big difference as to the level of risk taking on that debt has. And then the third thing, and then I'll turn it
Yeah.
back over to you, that I really learned was again, just a reminder that we have a choice in our life of the kind of life that we want to create. And I determined that despite lots of no's, right? I wanted to own more real estate. I realized my husband's job, his entrepreneurship business wasn't going to save us. I couldn't depend on even one of the largest employers in the world for my job security or our family's financial security or my retirement accounts. What everybody was still doing was paying me rent despite the economy. So I realized I need to take more control and build my income as well as my future on things that I had more control of. And so I moved really completely to real estate from that point on and made the decision that every decision every day, I'm going to not take no for an answer. Lenders weren't lending. Properties were there, but I couldn't get financing. Not to take no, and to continue to push and push and get creative and find other ways to buy property, for example, so that I could continue to create the life of my dreams, one step at a time, one action at a time, no matter how long it took.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you just very well articulated the three lessons that you learned from all of that financial hardship. And I just love it's a central theme for our show here is just taking ownership, not continuing to have a victim mentality. Yes, we are all victims in some sense, right, of certain circumstances and things, but it doesn't get you very far to stay there mentally. So I love that
Absolutely.
mindset shift of taking action, but also as you emphasize, not just one step. It is one step at a time, but it does sound like you also kind of were able to take a wider view of things as well and say, how does the market play into all of this? And kind of be strategic about it, but then able to kind of zoom back in and focus on the day to day. So I've heard this referred to as like a rubber band in marketing, where you kind of you blast out to a bigger audience, if you will, and then you zoom back in. And it sounds like you've been able to kind of navigate that from a planning and action, point of view, if you will.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it seems more that way than it probably was in my mindset at the time. At the time, it was like, what happened? What can I learn from this? It was really initially like fight or flight, right? Like, okay, I've lost almost all my 401k. Here's an example of making just a good, like nuanced micro decision. Lost most of my 401k. Companies are still going under. I need to pull it out. I know as a financial advisor, we're told never, ever, ever take out your 401k.
Sure.
I said, if I lose my job, I get a severance package. I may have to pay this back, but I took a 401k loan and I saw a building for sale across the street, a 4-unit, and it would bring in about $1,200 a month after all expenses. And I thought, I'm having a baby in a few months. I could lose my job. But if I have another $1,200 a month, that'll pay for formula. If I can't nurse, it'll pay for, for food, et cetera, to put on the table. And I knew that at least we would be okay. Like my mortgage was covered by my tenants. I lived in a 4-unit, which was another good decision I made the year before to just live below my means. So we had tenants paying. We bought that building and I thought, maybe in the future, I'll regret that I took out the money. But right now, here's one thing I can control. I can buy that building, have $1,000 more a month, and we'll be okay today. So it was very micro decisions like that, like just make the best decision I can. And then as I started really studying the economy and as banks kept saying no, I'm like, why are they saying no? I have a great job. I have great credit. AIG was in the news every day that they were laying people off and real estate was crashing. So no, I wasn't a good risk to these lenders, but I thought, what is happening and will it change? And when I started studying the markets, I learned about economic cycles, that the most opportunity is at the bottom when everyone's afraid. So that did kind of open my eyes to go, wait a second, if this is the bottom and I have more opportunity and there's tons of properties out here like I've never seen before, I just have to figure out how to get them financed and how to buy them when I have no money. So that became the macro picture, was I'm not going to say no. There are ways that investors are still doing deals without their own money, right? That's what we were sold in late night infomercials about no money down deals. Now I need to figure out, how can I buy properties with no money? Because I knew if I could buy a bunch at the bottom when there's no competition, that over time those properties would go back up in value, create me more cash flow. And so at that point, I started to think a little more, of the big picture, that I just got to make one decision every day by day, one more property, get as much as I can, however long it takes. And from then on, I've had a very macro perspective of where is the market and how should that impact what I do, what I buy, when I sell, et cetera.
Right. Well, it makes sense. You've just gotten more sophisticated in your investing approach.
Yeah.
but I will say, I thought Brandon Turner and Bigger Pockets created house hacking. So there's no way you could have been doing that back then. Now, I'm kidding. You don't have
2008.
you don't have to respond to that one. But
Yeah.
no, it is a very powerful way to go for sure. If someone's in that position, to live in a 4-unit, for example, and collect rent from 3 sets of tenants and have them pay your mortgage. So that's really smart. So kind
It's
of, if you could,
extremely powerful. That was
yeah.
another lesson. I knew that in order to expand my means in the future, and really at that time, all I wanted, Jamie, was to be home with my kids. I'm like, if I can just get my husband's business up where it makes what I make, I'll be
Mhm.
home. I wasn't even thinking about wealth. I was just thinking, I want to
Sure.
be home with my kids, have enough income. And so, I made that decision that in order for me to move across the country and take on the risk of a new business, which we knew 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years or so, then we
Sure.
need to downsize our life and not turn around and buy another big house. So we had learned that. And
Hmm.
so we lived below our means. And to this day, if we hadn't lived below our means and house hacking was a way for us to do that, we never would have had the extra money to start investing again and to even work toward expanding our means. And because we've always had that mindset of let's live below our means while we work to expand our means, both of those things have to happen at the same time if you
Hmm.
really want to change your financial future and
Hmm.
really want to grow wealth.
No, that's a very, very good point, because it's really easy for us to gloss over that point as far as the
Yes.
personal sacrifice that it requires to tighten your belts and tighten your budget at that point, because
Yes.
you didn't necessarily need to, maybe, but for your future you needed to.
Yeah.
Um, so compare and contrast, if you would, kind of that low point versus today. What do things look like for you today?
Jamie, I pinch myself. I truly, truly am extremely blessed, and I believe that. I believe that God has blessed us and opened up opportunity. At the same time that I recognize that I made some really good decisions, thankfully, out of the really poor decisions. But from 2009 until 2018. 2019 actually is when I actually retired from AIG. I
Mm.
didn't lose my job during that 10-year period, which was shocking because we kept saying we were going to.
Mhm.
And so I had a really good position that was not easy to replace. But essentially, for 10 years, we lived below our means. We did not buy a house for years. After we house hacked, we ended up with 4 children. So we ended up renting a house for several years while we bought other small properties with the money instead of a down payment on a home. But that 10 years of significant sacrifice where we did everything we made in our real estate investments, we put back into buying more. We didn't live on any of it. And so we lived below our means for 10 years. And then 4 years ago, when I retired from AIG, I had enough cash flow consistent in our rentals. At that point, I built about 100 units of my own in that 10-year period that seemed to take forever. It was 70, 80 hours a week of sacrifice. And then I started doing joint ventures of larger apartment buildings before I actually left AIG 4 years ago, and then syndication. So, now I have an 8-figure net worth. I've done a couple $1,000s in multifamily real estate. Myself and 2 partners own another 250 units. And then we do syndications of, several thousand units at this point. So it's night and day, the position that I'm in today, where my husband's now retired from his chiropractic business. I'm retired from AIG. I still work, but for me, instead of 70, 80-hour weeks for a decade, now I work because I want to, because I get to build a bigger legacy and help investors and things of that nature. But I work significantly less hours than I ever have, probably 30 to 35 hours a week. But I'm blessed that because we started this journey and didn't give up 10 years ago, that if I never did another deal a day in our lives, we would be set for the rest of our lives because of what we built and the sacrifices we made for a decade.
That's fantastic. That's congrats. I mean, that's
Thank
phenomenal.
you.
And it's it's so easy to look at someone's success and say, well, they, must be nice, or they're an overnight success. And if it was a long journey to get where you are. I know it was. And
Yes.
if you look back on where you were in your childhood, it certainly was not up and to the right straight line to success. A ton of
No.
ups and downs and a lot of sacrifice for sure.
Yeah.
But it's just fantastic. I mean, to see that, for the listener out there, that it is possible. They may not end up exactly how you are, how
Right.
your whatever your lifestyle is today, but they absolutely, if you have a long-term view, and you're willing to sacrifice, put in the work, you
Yes.
absolutely can get from adversity to abundance. And
Absolutely.
I don't pretend on this show that Anna Kelley has no more problems, and we
Uh-uh.
know that we all still have problems, but
Yes.
it's amazing the growth that you've experienced through your life. So just kudos to you. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing I'll just throw out there too, I'm really a firm believer being able to look back on my life. And I think you first reached out to me because of a book that I wrote where we kind of
Yep.
talked about, that journey to abundance from that adversity. But I've really learned to look at every challenge in life as not happening to me, but happening for me. Because when we go through adversity, when we go through challenges, it forces us to rise up and not accept complacency and the status quo or victim mentality. We have to say, okay, this is a challenge. How am I going to use this challenge and see it as a blessing and an opportunity that's going to set me up for that next level of growth? And if I hadn't been through all the challenges I've been through, I never would have even gone down the path of real estate. My life would have been easy and comfortable, and I would have thought, okay, this is fine. But those challenges made me think, what can I do to overcome this? This is happening for me. And I can either take advantage of what's happening for me, or I can stop and play the victim mentality and say, this is happening to me. I'm just not the kind of person that good things happen to. And so I think that's an important mindset shift as you go through
Definitely.
adversity, and you will many times in your life. How can you use this to better you as a person, to make you wiser, to make you more compassionate, and then just make good decisions through every challenge as a blessing and an opportunity rather than happening to you.
I love it. Yeah, there's not much for me to add there. That's fantastic. I'm going to fire off some questions, and we'll see where it goes.
Great.
What's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
I think people think that I've always been, really driven by money or success or a job. And really, that's not the case. I was always driven by, I just want to be okay. I want to not ever be in a situation that if my husband died or left me or was disabled, that I couldn't take care of myself and my children. And so it really was just about being able to take care of myself, and it led to so much more. And so, now I work and I do deals not because I need more money or want more money. I'm really not driven by the money, but
Hmm.
what kind of impact and legacy now can I leave?
Hmm.
Because I don't want to just sit on the beach and eat bonbons every day. Although that would be really enjoyable, it
Yeah,
wouldn't really help me to live up to a greater purpose to give back to this world. And so today I work and do deals because I can. I'm blessed to be able to do it, and I see they're a bigger purpose for the rest of my life than just doing more deals or things that are going to make me millions of dollars more.
sure. I love it. Both things can be true at the same time. Money can be very important, and I believe it is. Money and
Yes.
wealth are very important and can be used in very positive or very negative ways.
Yes.
So I don't like that. Unfortunately, some people bury their heads in the sand and they say, well, money's not the answer. Well, it's pretty important to understand how money works, but at the end of the day, it's not the end goal. It's not the end all be
Right.
all. So you've been able to kind of keep that in perspective. So that's great. What's one of your biggest failures or something that you'd prefer to maybe have a do-over on?
Mhm. In that 10 years that I was really working hard to be able to be home with my kids, I was so laser focused on the goal, that I was not going to take my foot off the gas ever. I filled every waking possible moment with looking for deals, renovating deals, becoming a better real estate investor. And I did all of that for my kids. I wanted to be home with my kids, but I missed out on a lot of opportunities to be more fully present with my kids, to take vacations, to take weekends off, to take breaks. And so, I'm glad that everything worked out. But my biggest regret is that I didn't just say, time with them. For example, my 19-year-old who's now in college, he wants to do real estate full time, but for years he hated it. He's like, I hated it. We
Mhm.
missed birthdays, we missed events, we never went on vacation. I slept on grody apartment floors while you painted in the middle of the night. Like, it wasn't, even though I thought, well, they're with me, I wasn't present and it wasn't a great experience for them.
Sure.
So I
Understood.
wish I had a do-over for that. Even
Yeah,
if it
no,
took me
that's
another couple of years to retire.
right, right. And I can, empathize it. Just any, whether it's in real estate or not, just being an entrepreneur it's very easy. No one's there to tell you to stop working.
Right. And if you
Um,
work full time, like you did before,
yeah,
I
yeah,
was working
exactly.
full time and running
Yep,
my husband's business and doing real estate. It's easy to fill up, your entire day with just
yeah,
trying to create financial freedom. And if you're not careful, you can become a slave to the pursuit of financial freedom. And that's not good either.
yep, absolutely. If you had to write another book this year, what would the topic be?
I'm actually working on one.
Well, there you go.
And it's really about creating life by design and for a greater purpose, and just the resilience to never give up on creating the future that you hope for.
It's fantastic. Any idea when that will be out?
Hopefully by the end of this year.
Awesome.
I've got work to do.
It's a Yeah, I've never written a book, but I used to be an editor, and I know there's a lot behind the scenes that goes into that. So,
Yes.
um, what's one thing in your business or real estate investing that you just didn't expect? Surprise, good, bad, or ugly. Otherwise, something that's really surprised you looking back.
Just how incredible the opportunities are out there to create wealth. Real estate really is the greatest wealth creator known to man. And it
Mhm.
has been historically. And, in the beginning, I was a little cynical that I could do it until I had enough money saved up to retire, because we're told by our financial advisors and every, thing that you read out there that the goal is to just set a little aside all the time. And eventually, when you're 65, you can enjoy life. I was really surprised at, especially starting at the bottom, at how quickly you really can create wealth, even when you don't have a lot of money. It's not easy to do so.
Sure.
It's hard work. It takes a significant amount of time, but it is possible. And I was really surprised by that, because at first I just dabbled in real estate for years. I flipped a house thinking I would make a bunch of money because HGTV told me I could, right? And it didn't
Sure.
work out so easily. Or the market crash and it didn't work out so easily. So although it's not easy or get rich quick,
Mhm.
real estate, when I look back and say, wow, I was able to go from negative net worth to 8 figures in a decade, I'm really still surprised when I look back that, wow, I can't believe I was actually able to achieve that.
That's great. That's really good. So, what's one thing that you're working on right now? What's a challenge you're facing in your business right now?
Oh, that's a really good question. In this market, we're back to very similar conditions in terms of the credit and lending markets as we were post 2009. So, because there's rapid volatility and changes in the Fed's monetary policy and basically interest rates, and there's questions about how long it's going to last. When will the Fed pivot? Will we have a deep recession? Will we have mass inflation? Banks are extremely nervous. And so what that's doing is, even if you're extremely credit worthy, have lots of assets and net worth and experience, they're offering very low loan to value loans today compared to where they were, a year ago, and really compared to where they've been since about 2012. So, we are post decade of easy monetary policy and an upwardly mobile economy. And so, we've had big apartment deals, both existing value add and development, where lenders are issuing term sheets saying, yes, we can do 75% LTV. And they call you back a week later and say, oh my goodness, our board says pencils down, no more loans, or we can only lend you 45% or 55%. Despite the strength of us, despite the strength of the asset and the location, the market really is really difficult to finance deals right now. And so
Hmm.
that's a challenge.
Sure, and it's a lot bigger challenge than when you were buying your first single family rental.
Yes.
Because there are a lot more moving parts and partners and the whole equity stack and all that. And there's a lot going on there. So,
And it forces you again to get creative and say, okay,
yeah,
there's lots of money out there. And how do we structure a deal in a way that's going to make the lender happy, private equity partners happy, private investors happy, and still generate good risk adjusted returns? So it forces us to always up our game when we have new challenges, for sure.
absolutely. You mentioned the three markets that you're focused on. Is there, can you speak to that a little bit? Why those three markets?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've really learned over time is if you want a dependable business plan, you want dependable finances, you need to invest where the income is dependable. And the way that you do that is you make sure that you're in markets where jobs are plentiful, that all the people that are living in your apartment complexes, for example, or your single family home, if they lost a job tomorrow, they could find another job in their backyard without having to move or without having to go on assistance and not be able to pay you. So while I'm very philanthropic in terms of what I do with my money, I've learned to not cater to those that don't have enough money, that are living check to check, that 60% of them are not going to be able to pay rent, right? I've also lived through the pandemic, which we didn't even talk about, with a couple thousand units, having to figure out how do we deal with paying bills and contractors and mortgages if our tenants can't pay. So having gone through that, it's really important in terms of, where you buy your investments, that you're in cities that are pro growth, pro jobs, low taxes, good cost of living, great schools, low crime. All of those factors are really, really important. And primarily where we find that, I might be partial because I'm a Texan, but is in Texas. And so I'm investing heavily in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, Houston, Texas suburbs, some suburbs of Austin. But those are markets that are very pro-growth and pro-business and bring a ton of people. So people are leaving states like California and New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, and they're moving to Texas and Florida and Georgia. Raleigh, North Carolina is a lot like Austin without all the homelessness, and it's still politically pretty conservative and landlord friendly, but there's a ton of high tech, high paying jobs. It's a financial hub, and there's not enough supply for all the people that are moving there. And that's a big factor, is supply and demand. If you're investing in great areas, but it's been overbuilt and there's not a lot of demand or population growth, then you're going to struggle with rents into a recession, just like you would if you're, in a class C, C minus type neighborhood. So those are the reasons that I invest in, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Texas primarily. I've also owned a couple complexes in Atlanta, Georgia, and it has really strong fundamentals as well.
Got it. That's a very thorough answer. That's very good. Before we talk about how our listeners can reach out to you, what's a book or two besides your own that you could recommend for my audience?
Okay, so when it comes to economics, because that was one of my big lessons, I would really follow The Principles for a Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. He's someone who thinks very big picture and helps understand what kind of shifts are happening in the world and in demographics in order to help you understand how those things could impact your investing. Another one is The End of the World is Just the Beginning by Zahn. It's a newer book that also really talks a lot about demographic shifts. Another book, two others that I'll recommend. One is more of a personal book, and it's called Life in Air. And it really talks about creating your life by design, living the life that you want today, not having to wait for the future to live it. Highly recommend that. And then in terms of real estate investing, if you're a multifamily investor, there's a great book that's still one of my favorites. It's the only book I ever read before I started this path of this 10-year journey to create wealth. And it was Dave Lindahl's Multifamily Millions. And to this day, it's a great reference book to just show you what's possible and how you can create great wealth through multifamily investing.
That's fantastic. Yeah. You've made this interview very easy for me. You're very well spoken, and you've offered a ton of knowledge for the listener out there. And again, thank you for joining us. Congrats on all the success. I know it's been a ton of work. For a listener who does want to reach out to you, where can they find you online?
Great. So if you're an accredited investor and you're looking for passive real estate investments, you can find me at greaterpurposecapital.com for opportunities there. And if you're looking for a coach or a mentor to help you through various types of real estate investing, the things that I have experience with, you can find me on my website at reimom.com and send me a friend request on social media at Anna Kelley, REI Mom.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really what it boils down to, is active and passive. I've found that in my own mortgage note business is,
Yes.
so that's another strategic move on your part for sure. So to our listener out there, I highly recommend you follow Anna and reach out to her if you're either active or passive, or just want to learn more about multifamily syndications and all the the lessons that Anna has learned through her ups and downs along this journey. So Anna, thank you so much again for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
You're so welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
And to our listener out there, we really appreciate your time, which is your most valuable asset. We appreciate you spending that resource with us. Please do like and share, primarily share the show. If you like this episode, if you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. That goes a long way for us. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on From Adversity to Abundance. We hope today's episode has equipped you with valuable insights and practical advice to elevate your real estate journey. For more inspiring stories and resources, visit us at www.adversitytoabundance.com. If this episode has inspired you, please share it with a friend who could also benefit from our conversation. Together, let's turn adversity into abundance. Until next time, keep building your mental fitness and your real estate empire.